McGillicuddy and Murder's Pawn Shop, Season 5, Episode 5. Hester Wrathbone begins to die. October 25th, 1921. Continued. Wrath and I sat together in the train car, our fingers interlaced. My heart was absolutely full. He was crying. We were at a pinnacle of emotion, sloppy with ache and hope, and it was a bad time to be suddenly threatened by the existence of Wrath's doppelganger. A lot of things flashed through my mind, diary. First off was, I had just gotten Wrath back. I was not about to lose him to a murdering cadaver. I wasn't sure at what point in my adventures Wrath had ceased to be a threat and had become a precious friend, but I was not going to let that thing anywhere near him. Wrath, despite being turned into a night enthusiast, still understood the difference between good and evil. He still cared about me. Was it because he had already been brought to the brink of human suffering, and he understood how much it hurt when other people take your power away, that now he refused to do the same? Once he had wanted to murder all the night enthusiasts, but that had been revenge, a bloody way of saying, no, never again. You will not hurt anyone ever again. Murder is not the way that I would have chosen, but his plan at least had been to snuff out horrible people. Something in his soul now refused to be shifted. He had lost his joy, but somehow he was still Wrath. He refused to be one of them, even though they had made him one. He had remained. Well, I was ready to fight to the fingernail to protect this Wrath who was still with me. That was one of the things I was thinking. The other thing was that Dawn Mamungus was now lying dead on a library floor, with evidence that her doppelganger had been there. If this thing came any closer, I assumed it would also try to stick a knife into Wrath's back. I glanced left and right. We didn't have any weapons. We could just teleport, but would it follow us? It seemed to know where Wrath was. It was able to find him out of the blue. I suddenly remembered how it had appeared in the Whiskerlet world, a world that should have been impossible for it to access. It was so drawn to Wrath that it could appear even there. It had to be near him. I breathed out slowly. "Maud," Wrath said, "you appear to be tense." "Yes," I said, "I am tense. Remember when I warned you that your doppelganger was coming to attack you?" "Yes." "Well," I gestured, "there it is." Wrath looked out across the train yard. It was uncanny. The way the thing stood there and stared, totally still. Looking like him, but a better part of him, one that wasn't as damaged. Remember, no part of Wrath's doppelganger was made of wood. It didn't budge. It looked like a ghost. I began to grow, suddenly, and irrationally, petrified. I was too close to the supernatural, and it was making the hair on my arms stand up. "What's it doing there?" Wrath breathed. "This is the doppelganger," I said, "the cadaver. Do you remember? From the Whiskerlet world." Wrath glared at me. "Maud, I am insane. I am not stupid. Of course I remember. I also remember that we have no idea what it is or what it wants." "Well," I said, "I think I might know more about what it wants." The thing took one step closer, then stopped, utterly still. It was like it wanted us to think it hadn't nudged forward. I clutched Wrath's hand so hard, I cut off both our circulation. Dawn Mamungus's doppelganger killed her. With a knife. "What?" Wrath breathed. He turned and looked at me, and for a moment the bright look in his eyes was back. "Dawn Mamungus is dead?" "Indeed," I said. Wrath stared at the doppelganger. It took another step closer. Wrath's eyes widened, and a grin spread across his face. He looked absolutely elated. "Oh, Maud," he said, "a great evil has gone out of the world. Dawn Mamungus is dead." Normally I don't feel good about so much glee regarding death, but I could see where Wrath was coming from. I had felt sorry for Dawn, as it is hard to not feel sorry for a dead body, but Wrath was spinning my perspective a bit. Was Dawn's death a good thing? Not just a bizarre mystery, but an unexpected advantage. I had felt lost, surrounded, like there was no way we could possibly win this war. Had we just had an unexpected victory? Perhaps an evil had gone out of the world. Ugh, if only there was a way to do that without killing them. But Wrath was right. It was another way to look at it. An evil had gone out of the world. I felt lighter. But now, Wrath murmured, and he wetted his lips. He clasped our held hands with his right hand, so that now our fingers were all bundled together, gathered in mutual terror. I placed my hand on top of his. Now, Maud, we have to deal with the doppelganger that is coming right towards us. We were like children, watching a terrifying moving picture show. The doppelganger advanced one step, about every 15 seconds now, pausing in between each step, as if it had never moved at all. "Do you suppose it has magic powers?" Wrath whispered. "The other one just used a knife," I said. "Do you suppose it's listening?" Wrath said. "Probably." Thing was only a few feet away. Then, to our surprise, it stopped. This time I think it meant to stop, because it widened its stance, and slowly stretched one arm forward. I was terrified by the arm. I was sure it was about to point a finger of doom at Wrath, stretched towards us like an ill omen. Instead, the cadaver tilted its palm. Palm up, it stood there, like it wanted Wrath to take its hand. "What's it doing, Maud?" Wrath said. At this point, he was practically ducking behind me. "I don't know," I hissed. We waited. The cadaver waited. I began to grow almost bored. My spine was tense. My hands throbbed from clutching Wrath's hands for so long. I shifted, unable to keep the pins and needles posture for any longer. I was exhausted from waiting for this thing to spring. "Maud," Wrath said, after a while, letting go slowly of my hands, "do you really think it's going to attack me?" I felt a bit silly now. This thing was so passive. What if it's lulling you into a false sense of security? Wrath shifted slowly to the edge of the train car, like he was going to jump down. "You said the other one stabbed Dawn in the back. Or rather, that Dawn's wound was from a knife in the back." "As far as I could tell," I said. "That's interesting," Wrath said. "That's very, very interesting." Wrath hopped down. I cupped my hands to my nose and mouth. I wasn't going to tell him not to approach the cadaver, because it mystified me too, but I was terrified. I wondered if I should jump down too, be ready with a handy 2x4 if it came to it. Wrath stepped up to the cadaver. He widened his stance, precisely in the same way. Under the light of the moon, until they were mirror images of each other, Wrath and cadaver, part puppet and all human man. Wrath lifted his arm in the same way, stretched out. He wrapped his hand in the cadaver's hand. And just like that, the cadaver vanished. I yelped. Had it teleported? Why? Had it not expected Wrath to face it like that? Then Wrath turned around, and I suddenly realized what had happened to both him and Don Mamungus. Wrath was different. Some of the wooden pieces of him were gone. I jumped off the train car and raced up to him. I was going to stand across from him and ogle him oddly, but to my surprise, Wrath picked me right up off the ground. He was hugging me. "Well, this was fun." Wrath set me down, and I continued to goggle. "What?" he said. "What is it?" "You're—" He touched his face. His shoulders softened. It was such a gentle reaction to such an enormous moment of healing. Wrath took a deep breath and shut his eyes. The wood wasn't all gone, diary, but his wooden eye, it was only half wood now, half a human eye, half an iris, peeped at me when he met my gaze again. "What happened?" I said, although I thought I knew. "It was a bit of me," Wrath said, "a bit of me that was missing. And now it's back inside." He seemed stunned. I would be. I was in awe. My heart spun. Dawn hadn't been killed by her doppelganger. A shudder ran through me. Dawn had seen her doppelganger, not trusted it, and stabbed it in the back. Then when the doppelganger had reached out and touched her, she had absorbed it, and the wound had become her own. What a strange and terrible way to die. But what? I said. How? It was a part of you that had been split away? Why? I think, Wrath said slowly, and he rolled his head from side to side, as if he was stretching after a very long nap. I think it was when I was put into the train car. My mouth dropped open. Oh, of course. It would have been a splitting, shrieking bit of magic. Horrible. And typically impossible to put someone back together again afterwards. When I had released Wrath with a wish, a tiny bit of him had been split into a different body. This cadaver had been wandering around ever since Wrath had been freed, trying to reunite with him. Perhaps it had needed time to realize what it was and what it was doing. And Dawn, of course. That's why there was a doppelganger of both Dawn and Wrath. It was one of the few things they had in common. The train cars. Dawn had been put into a train car too, if only for a little bit of time. The cadavers. I had solved one of my atrocious mysteries. I sat down on the ground, but the sharp little stones were uncomfortable, so I was back on my feet again in a minute. I knew what the cadavers were. They were split identities left over from being rescued from a train car. "Oh, Wrath," I said. "How do you feel?" I felt like I was looking at a different person. His coat and hat were the same, but his face was nearly human. He seemed different, too. Quieter. More sane. I felt suddenly shy, like I didn't know him. I also felt like something was wrong, but that was ridiculous. This was all good. It had to be. "Feel?" Wrath said. He turned and smiled at me. It was such a warm smile. I got that bit of my soul back. The part the night enthusiasts took out of me. I'm not a night enthusiast anymore. Enough of my soul something, the thing they took. It was still in this body. I'm not a night enthusiast anymore, Maud. I'm not one of them. I knew that Wrath wanted to believe this was over, that he was well, that what the night enthusiasts had done to him had been undone. I think healing feels like that a lot of the time. We decide we are well because we want to believe it, but in fact we have just barely begun. There is a lot more good to achieve. Wrath felt like he had been restored completely, but I knew he had only been a little. But the little was enough, and it gave me courage. Monumental bad things had happened out of the blue. But could good ones happen too, with no warning? Were the scales of the universe more in our favor than I had supposed? "I don't really know what to say," I said. "Don't say anything," Wrath said. "Just pretend I've always been this Wrath. Let's forget about the other me's." I smiled. It tugged on my heartstrings. He was so intoxicated by this glimpse of a better heart and brain. But I also felt nervous. Wrath and I decided to teleport together to Europe, where it was day, and we bought ice cream. It was one of the best decisions I have ever made. He seemed transcendent, in shock. "Now what?" I said. Then I jumped a little bit. Shouldn't we be warning the others? It wasn't just Dawn that was put into the train car. There will be more cadavers. "So," Wrath said, taking a bite of ice cream. "So what if they attack themselves the way that Dawn did and end up dead?" "Melinda Maudie Merkel," Wrath said. "I fail to see how this will be a problem." All right, so he hadn't changed that much. "I don't want to save them, Maud, so there's no use looking at me like that." "Wrath, we should at least warn them what's coming." "They treat me like a dog," Wrath said. "They were the ones who did this to me, and they can't stand to look at it. That, and I did try to murder them all with poison gas. But do you think I'm welcome there? They made me like them, but they don't want me. I haven't exactly been invited to any of the social events." "But I'm dead," I said, "and if you pretend to be their ally for now, you can get information, walk through buildings without being hit on the head with a club, things like that. You giving them information that will help them, will make them trust you. Think how valuable it would be if they trusted you right now. We could do more. We could accomplish more." Wrath shook his head. By now, Maud, their fate is their own. If they're going to see their doppelganger and stab it, they probably already have. Wrath, I said, for heaven's sakes, just go warn them. They won't believe me, Wrath said. They will when they see your eye, I said. Besides, how long will it take? 5 minutes? I will buy you another ice cream. Will you? Wrath said. And teleported in the greatest sulk that I have ever seen. It was odd, for some reason, to see Wrath teleporting. I know I've teleported with him, but to be honest, right now I can't think of a time where I watched him leave and I stayed behind. I probably have, but it felt strangely humanizing, different for Wrath. When he was gone, I put my chin in my hands and stared down into the gentle reflecting surface of my empty ice cream dish. My heart hammered. Diary, this was too easy. It was too much good, too soon, and without any warning, and I do not trust that. I could sense deep down that something had gone wrong. Something was shifting. Something inside of Wrath had been changed, and it was not good. I couldn't shake the feeling, but I didn't understand what was going on. I had a suspicion brewing, a nervousness. I wanted to believe that Wrath was fixed, but there was something different about Ariana's spell, the magic that had turned everyone into night enthusiasts. Remember when Noble and I had changed into night enthusiasts for 24 hours? We had been grouchy, but still ourselves. I had made some terrible decisions, it was true. But here is a key difference. We had every intention of defeating the night enthusiasts. Our identity had remained intact. Was losing a small bit of our soul so powerful that we instantly agreed to become night enthusiasts? No. We had still belonged to the pawn shop. We had lost soul pieces, but we hadn't immediately run with open arms to become night enthusiasts. Well, when Noble was changed by Raster, that is exactly what he did. He became a night enthusiast, heart and soul, at once. He switched sides. That, to me, Diary, is a different bit of magic. Extra power. I think Ariana's deal with the Whiskelets was not just to remove the soul pieces, but to create a kind of reverential, supernatural allegiance. Part of my friends' hearts were moved. They were in love with the night enthusiasts. Like a horrible love spell. It was extra, different magic, I think. It was more powerful than just a removal. Something else had been put in. Well, what if some of that same magic was still in Wrath? I had just sent him back to the night enthusiasts. What if I really couldn't trust him? What if, despite his best intentions, they were still in his head? We hope you've enjoyed Season 5, Episode 5, Hester Wrathbone Begins to Die, of McGillicuddy and Murder's Pawn Shop. McGillicuddy and Murder's Pawn Shop is written and performed by Minerva Sweeney Wren, all rights reserved. Thank you for continuing all this way with Maud's adventures. New audio dramas are coming, and there is news on those, as well as fandom fun, if you follow me on Instagram and Twitter, at Meg Macaulay Inc. That's Inc, I-N-K. Please consider becoming a monthly supporter on Patreon. Or, if you can't commit right now, say thank you with a one-time donation. I now have Venmo, at Minerva Sweeney Wren. All links are in the description of this episode. McGillicuddy and Murder's Pawn Shop will continue with Season 5, Episode 6. The Shadow Creature Inside.